which brings us to, we were able to get Representative Slater?
We're trying to get him.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we deal with the Cortez bills? So, Representative Cortez, I believe, is in the queue somewhere. Yeah, I see her there. So she has 3 bills on tonight. The first bill is 5394. It's an act related to state affairs and government preservation of families with Disabled Parents Act. It precludes a parent's disability from serving as the sole basis for the state to institute an investigation of the disabled parent's family and presumptively their capacity to be a parent. Representative Cortez, you're on the air.
On the air. Happy to be with you all this evening.
Thanks.
What a great radio show. I've enjoyed it. Thank you, members of the committee and Chairman Craven. This bill is come back around again. This is the Parents with Disabilities Act, and the purpose of the bill would be to not allow a person's disability to be the sole reason why they would be engaged with DCYF, have any kind of an issue brought against them by DCYF. And I believe we have some witnesses that can speak to their personal experiences with this. It particularly happens in the hospitals with women who have just recently given birth. What should be a very special time can become very traumatic and nerve-wracking for new mothers who are questioned in a way that able-bodied people would not be questioned about their ability to parent. And with that, Chairman, I would ask you to bring on the witnesses for this.
Is Mrs. Pyres ready to testify? Mrs. Pyres,
Yes.
you are on the air.
Oh, good evening, Chairman Craven and members of the committee. My name is Graciela Pyres, and I'm here testifying both as a blind parent and as the president of the National Federation of the Blind of Rhode Island. We have been testifying on this bill. I believe this is our 4th consecutive year on this bill, and I'm in favor of the bill. Disability should never be the reason for taking a child away from their parents. And I feel like it's unfair. We're not asking for special treatment. We're just asking for equitable treatment. I wanted to share my story when I had my son. I had an emergency C-section. And shortly after I was in my room, social worker came by and she was asking me questions like, how do you know when to feed the baby? And I said, well, babies, usually you put them on a schedule. You feed them every so often, 3 hours, whatever, 4 hours, depending on what they need. And her next question was, how can you tell time? And these questions may seem a little bit, they're little innocent questions, no big deal. But to me, it was telling me that my blindness was an issue. Both my husband and I blind, and they were asking me if we would be able to take care of our son. And I hadn't even seen my son because he was born premature, and I hadn't, it was an emotional period for me at the time because I just had an emergency C-section. I was still, with the effects of the anesthesia, and just to be questioned and to feel like powerless because I felt like if I didn't know the answer or if I had the wrong answer, that they had the power to take my child. And so, I did answer her questions, and I was 37 at the time, so I've been living my life. I can tell time. I had I worked, went to school, went to college, had 2 degrees. She didn't know any of those things, but, I learned to live my life. So other parents are not asked these questions. To me, it was a stressful experience, and I know of other families which you'll see testimony and hear testimony this evening, which were also questioned. One family particularly lost their child for 8 months that they'll never get back. So we would urge the committee to vote on this bill and pass this bill because I think families should be able to go and have a child without being afraid of that they're going to lose their child based on their disability. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions of Ms. Pyres by the members of the committee? Okay, we have one more witness on this bill. Hello?
Good evening.
Good evening. It's Bob Craven. I'm the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and you're on the air.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak in support of the bill. My name is Ian Birchall. I'm 32 years old. I was born with a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. So that's a degenerative condition of the retina that leads to progressive vision loss. So I am calling to share a story about the birth of my daughter Holly and some of our experiences that we, myself and my wife, went through while at the hospital. So I would like to start off by saying that I'm not trying to point any fingers or lay any blame. Pregnancy is definitely a very stressful time for any new parents. We did our best to prepare. We spent those months reading books, and we attended an orientation as the hospital hosted, where we were given a full tour of the facility. And sorry, I just ran up some stairs. It was a full tour, along with a very instructive rundown of what we could expect while staying at the hospital. And everything was going very smoothly for us. My wife had a relatively normal pregnancy up until the point where they told us that she needed an emergency C-section. So even that procedure, being very standard these days, went well. So our daughter was born, and she had a slight problem breathing, which had them take her and place her in the ICU for 12 hours. And this is where things kind of changed for us a little bit. After her 12-hour stay in the ICU, the hospital came in to inform us that she had been released, but they were going to do us a favor and place her in the nursery for the night so that we could rest up and prepare for our first day as a family. They were true to that. They brought her to us at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she wasn't in our arms for longer than 10 minutes before a psychotherapist of some sort came to us and started asking us in our new role as parents, having our disability. My wife is also legally blind, and the questions were, considering the fact that we both are very, very successful. I graduated from Providence College in 2010. My wife and I had held jobs for over 5 years in the same locations. She was a daycare assistant for many years and taught many other people's children how to, do the things that children need to be taught how to do. And I fully appreciate the fact that this was probably a very routine thing that takes place in the hospitals. They want to make sure the babies are all safe and in good care. It got to the point where they had asked my wife if she had ever had thoughts of throwing our child against a wall. Now, my wife has definitely got a very well-documented medical history of health-related anxiety. So these things never occurred to her, but these questions had her anxiety through the roof. The spike in blood pressure guaranteed our stay at that hospital for the next week. Every time we'd start to get it under control, they would be back to ask us the same round of questions again. Were we feeling comfortable as new parents? And they started asking us if they could stop by our house 2 to 3 times a week to check on Holly, and so on and so forth. And it became very tough to convince my wife that we weren't being investigated or observed very, very closely. I tried to just say this is routine at the beginning, but towards the end of it, even I had my doubts. I was very nervous and on edge And then I had found out that, going back to that very first night, they hadn't had a nursery in the hospital for about 2 years at that time. And where our daughter spent her first night after leaving the ICU was actually in the location where children being observed by DCYF were kept. So that kind of sort of inflamed our concern a little bit. Eventually, we did get my wife's blood pressure, which was very dangerous at the time. We went home and we started our life, with a very, very wonderful support network of friends and family who have been there to help us along the way. We had done our research. We had our health coverage all picked out. And even with proof of health insurance, the hospital wanted to make sure that, they did everything they could for us. We spent almost 3 hours looking through health insurance options that just didn't apply to us because we had made too much money. But it was very frustrating to try to explain that we've done our homework. We are very familiar with the assistive technology that's out there. It's not very tough to get hands on a talking kitchen scale to weigh an empty bottle and then slowly pour formula into it and keep tabs on how many ounces are in that bottle. Lots of questions, and I can understand that these questions are being asked by people who may have never met or had long conversations with people with visual impairments, but having to explain it over and over and over again to the very, very numerous staff members that came to talk to us, it made us feel a certain way, that there might have been something to be concerned about. And again, that all went away when we got home. Fast forward to today, our daughter Holly is 2.5 years old, very, very good speaker. She is learning how to play the piano, and she loves to sing and dance. And the greatest gift that my wife and I have ever had we've been blessed. We have been absolutely blessed. All the things that I thought were going to be the hard things turned out to be the easiest things, and the things that I never anticipated, getting her to eat dinner is harder than changing a diaper sometimes. But I just really wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share this, and I hope that as you review this legislation, you'll remember something of our story and see to give other people with disabilities, whether they're parents or expected parents, the chance to enjoy this pride and sense of accomplishment that my wife and I get to experience every single day with Holly. Thank you.
Vice Chair McEntee, you have a question?
No, thank you, Chairman. I think this is a fantastic bill. It's high time we pass this. My heart goes out to the two witnesses that just testified. As an attorney, it really offends me that this sort of thing is going on. As you do, Chairman, we do practice in family court at times, and it is just very difficult to believe that these is still going on. But hearing it from the witnesses, I really feel for you, and I think this is a good bill. Terry, Representative Court Friend has put it in several years now, and it's high time we pass it. Thank you, and hopefully this won't happen to anyone else again.
Thank you. Dr. Clavesi, you had a question?
Yeah, basically, the lawyers on the committee, can you hear me?
Yes.
Basically, to the lawyers on the committee, two questions. First, with regard to the last story we heard, are there laws or regulations in place that would trigger that type of activity from the hospital? And the reason why, and as a layman, I'm wondering, working backwards from the story, is there something that there's some rules or regulations that maybe we passed Department of Health has passed, or some agency, some set of regulations that would have initiated or triggered the activity by the hospital, which, by the way, I disagree with that for the rest. But I'm wondering, we're trying to pass a bill going forward to correct something. Is there something as a legal basis or a set of regulations that we have to look at that would, that triggered this activity? Is there anything that any of the lawyers here know about regarding this? Well, I guess not.
Carol McAtee, Carol's got an answer.
Problem, Doc. Once they refer you at the hospital and have DCYF get involved, then it's an uphill, then they're already fighting. So make it clear that from the very start, they can't discriminate against these people because of their disability. So, I mean, that's how, this is how this happens. I don't think the court would just take it upon themselves to discriminate, but since DCYF or agencies are already involved, that they present themselves as if there's a problem, and once they're in your life, they're hard to get out. So if there's a reason that isn't accurate or isn't just reason, now you're stuck fighting them to get them out of your life. So that's my experience as a lawyer representing people. So
no, that's not what I'm getting at.
All
I'm
right.
not talking what happens during the process afterwards. I'm wondering, was there anything that triggered the activity by the hospital to do what they did that first night? Are there rules or regulations in place that we have to address, that we have to root out, that we have to terminate? Okay. In addition to going forward with legislation similar to this, is there something? In other words, what triggered those actions by the hospital?
I have another thought on this, and that is that in addition to this legislation, there needs to be more on-point training for nurses and CNAs and social workers and doctors in hospitals so that they're more truly helpful with all patients and not making some patients and new families feel like they're less than or unable or something. There's some training that needs to be happening, some awareness raising.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
The second question I have is, what is disability defined as in this bill? Are we talking just physical disability, or are we talking mental disability?
I think that question would be addressed to the sponsor, so if she can answer it, otherwise we'll leave it to the lawyers.
I'm sorry, Representative Cortez, I can't, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I thought I unmuted. We're talking about all disabilities, really.
So you're talking mental and physical disabilities.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right, that concludes testimony on House Bill 5394.